Hi, Betty. Welcome to the archive.
Well, thank you very much. I love to do anything with you because you're the best.
Thank you, Betty. All right. So let's start talking about your childhood. When did you grow up?
When did I grow up or where did I grow up? You said when.
Let's start with when, and then I'll ask where.
I think I grew up by the time I was young. I was doing a lot of stuff at 16, 15, but I grew up in Floral Park, Queens.
Floral Park, Queens.
Queens, New York City.
Okay, so what was Queens like during the 60s, 50s, 60s?
Well, my sister, my two older sisters, they watched American Bandstand, and I used to watch it and dance like them. So I became a good dancer when I got older, and we had a lot of fun with that. The 60s were a fun time. It was, people were still going to church, but they were enjoying to go to church. You know, it was that type of thing. And people, neighbors were good to each other. Unfortunately, there was a lot of prejudice and stuff like that, but in my neighborhood, I always felt like it was like a haven away from the prejudice stuff. It was nice. It was nice, no problems. I liked it. And of course,
So there was like white people, black people.
well, you know, it's really funny because, well, this black man, he owned all the area. It was like a potato farming area, and he actually was the landowner who sold all the different properties for people to have their houses. And so that was different, especially back in the 50s and 60s, right? But our neighbors were a Puerto Rican family, the Sedanos, and my mom was probably the only people on the block that was like buddies with them, and my sister and her friend, her girlfriend. So, you know, but we were not the prejudiced type. We were a happy family. And my mother was always psychic. Like my Aunt Joyce used to come over and they used to do seances and stuff like that. And they taught me, you know, my mother showed me a couple of lines in the palm, what it meant when I was a young kid. And I started doing readings at the lunch line at school. So that was cool. And then at a certain point, though, you know, like kids would, instead of saying hi to me, they put their hands in my face. So then I started charging money at 16. But the 60s, the 50s were pretty good. I was very young in the 50s, you know, that type of thing. And then the 60s, of course, I became a flower child at a very young age. I would say about 15 years old.
When did you first see flower children?
In Greenwich Village, in the West Village and the East Village in New York City. I used to take the bus with my girlfriend Terry, and then we'd take the train and we'd go to the village. And back in the day, they would call us teeny boppers because we were 15 years old, stuff like that. And that's what kids did. They used to go to the village because they wanted to be hippies, and that's what they did. So, but we had a great time, and at a very young age, I even started doing readings in coffee houses in the village, in Greenwich Village. And then
did you become friends with all the hippies that way?
In fact, I eventually I moved to Greenwich Village at a very young age, at 17 years old. I moved to Greenwich Village, and that was a great time. But then my mom and dad, after my brother Joey was killed in Vietnam in 1967, they moved up here to York, Maine. And that's where my mom's from a long time ago. Actually, Berwick, Maine, a long time ago. And I wanted to stay in New York, so I did. And then I was a real hippie, because I was living in the East Village in New York City.
Okay.
I had a good time.
So did you hear the music before you met the hippies, or did you meet the hippies and then hear the music?
Well, back in the day, I really was, I loved like Aretha Franklin. I liked a lot of R&B, early R&B, blues. Of course, I heard a lot about everybody. I didn't get to see the Beatles. I didn't get to see the Rolling Stones, and I didn't get to see my favorite, which was the Doors. He died young, Jim. I loved Jim Morrison. But I used to live 5 blocks from the East, what's it called? The Fillmore East, that's right, the Fillmore East Concert Hall. So I went to tons and tons of concerts. I heard music, rock and roll, also when I was 15, 14. of course. A lot of us heard mostly the Beatles, you know.
Did you hear Chuck Berry or Ike
Oh, yeah.
Turner?
Oh, yeah, all the, you know. Don't forget, I watched American Bandstand with my sisters. And they had all the, do the twist and do everything else. And Chubby Checker and the whole shebang. Yeah, it was good. And then, let me see. My claim to fame, of course, was in 1970. I was 19. I told the people that were running a concert on 2nd Avenue at the Anderson Theater, November 20th, 1970, that I was the Good Witch of the East Village, and they had to let me in because they said there was no seats left. And I said, well, you have to let me in because I'm the Good Witch. And they said, okay, you could go backstage and hang out with the guys from the Grateful Dead. So they said, here she is, the Good Witch of the East Village, Jerry. She wants to give you a reading. And he goes, far out, man. So I start telling him that his band is still going to be trucking till he's an older guy. He says, I love this girl. Then he gave me something weird to drink. And boy, all of a sudden he goes, come with me. And we were out on the stage, and he told me to dance the concert. So that was a good time. It was very good. Nice.
Okay.
A good memory.
So...
Good memory.
So you're hit with a little bit of bong water by Jerry Garcia.
Well, you know, back in the day, that's how things were with the Grateful Dead, I guess, right? Well, thankfully, I have friends that made sure that I got home safely. Thank God. But it's not easy to not be able to get a photo. If anybody out there knows anybody that has a photo, like a Polaroid picture of the concert, I'd love to see myself on stage. So many people have looked all over the place to see, is there anybody that has 8mm or anything, you know, because back in 1970, it wasn't that easy to video. No videos yet, right?
Yeah.
So, but then I ended up working in a really cool, in Greenwich Village. Now, Greenwich Village back in the day, you've heard of Serpico?
Yeah, the cop, eventually Al Pacino played him in a movie.
Yeah, that's in the 70s. Well, I knew him, Serpico. But I was working in a famous Middle Eastern nightclub called the Fiend John. I waitressed and I belly danced. The hippie turned into the Middle Eastern scene. You know, I made very good money there. My son was born in 1972, my Joey, and we lived a nice lifestyle because I did very well. But back in the day, what was I getting at? You could tell me.
Did you know Serpico?
Serpico. See what happens when you get older? No. No. Serpico, there was what they call the Knapp Commission, and he blew the whistle. We had a lot of police that helped us out, supposedly off hours, you know, when they were protecting. Because when you work in a Middle Eastern nightclub, there's problems between the Arabs and the Israelis sometimes and stuff like that. So we had police that were there as security, you know, because it was a very famous nightclub.
Yeah.
And Serpico blew the whistle on a lot of people that while they were working, they were doing this kind of service for the clubs, cabarets, and they were making extra money and they're supposed to be working and people were taking bribes and blah, 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 blah. So was Serpico a good guy? I guess so, because in the long run, the police weren't able to, you know, say, you better give me some money or we're going to do something to you. That was back in the day. Now, we hope the police are better, but then again, we don't know for sure. They try to be good, right? I'm still into rock and roll, but now I'm into all these famous guys coming from the Middle East playing music. So it was kind of cool, you know, it was nice. And I was the only one, and they spoke different languages. I mean, everybody spoke English, but there was Arabs, Israelis, Jewish people, all kinds of Middle Eastern people, and just people that loved that kind of music back in the day. And then, let me see, back home in Brooklyn, there was a lot of crap going on with this guy. Son of Sam was a guy that went around, was killing a lot of girls and their boyfriends, especially if she had long brown hair and she was with her boyfriend. He all of a sudden just shot people left and right in Brooklyn. And I got to a point where I said, I can't take this anymore. I had to wear my hair up all the time because I had the long dark hair. And I said, this guy's out of his mind. So finally, a terrible thing happened. It was really bad, that this girl was killed from my neighborhood. And I said, I'm going to Maine to go visit the family. So I took my son, I got on the Greyhound bus, and I went to Maine. The Greyhound bus used to stop right in York Beach, Maine, where I lived.
Wow.
Yeah, where my mom and dad lived, okay, and my brother Jimmy. So I was in Boston. We were changing the buses and to go on to Maine. And there was, all of a sudden I saw on the paper, Son of Sam caught, you know. So that was really cool, that I didn't have to worry anymore. So I went back to New York, and I was never really totally afraid. I don't know. Back in the day, it depended upon what neighborhood you were in. You had to be careful. I remember the first blackout. The first blackout in New York, I think it was when was it? The late 60s. There was hardly any crime in New York City. Everybody was so scared to death that it was pitch black that everybody just stayed home.
Everyone stayed.
And the funny thing is, we all found money on the ground, like people dropping money, and because the lights went out and all that. The second blackout, which is in the 70s, and there was a lot of crime. But the first one, because the old days was like that. We could go outside and not lock the door and not worry about anything, right? Back in the 60s, the 50s, stuff like that. I was in school. The teacher said something terrible has happened, children. I was probably, trying to think, what year was that? I think it was 63. And I was probably maybe around 12, maybe 11. And the teacher, I remember she started crying. She goes, the president's been shot. And we all started crying because the teacher was crying. Not that everybody knew everything, but I did. I liked JFK. He was really good. And she shut the door. She says, we're going to lock the door because everybody's taking this very hard, and we're going to have your parents come and get you and bring you home. So it was really something. And so that was pretty bad. My mom and dad said, okay, go in the basement, and we don't know much about a nuclear bomb, but what we want to do is we want to put plastic on the windows and jugs of water, and then if something happens, we'll all run downstairs underneath the staircase, and we should be all right. I'll never forget that. My father meant well. I mean, who knew even what the impact of a nuclear bomb would be? I mean, we never heard of such a thing, really.
Did you do duck and cover
in
school?
We did the duck and cover. Mm-hmm. And as I got older, as teenagers, I remember this one kid, he says to me, yeah, you could bend over and kiss your butt goodbye if we ever have something like that happen. So we knew at that point there really wasn't much you could do if it happened. But thank God nothing happened.
Did you ever, there were a couple of education movies on nuclear bombs, like the day after?
No, as a hippie, I saw that. They made it into like a joke thing. You know, what would happen if the bombing kiss your butt goodbye and, you know, peace, love, and happiness. Hopefully it never happens.
Okay.
I was such a hippie that I wasn't into your, like, big traditional, this is where it's at type of situation. You know, this is what we're going to do and we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
I mean...
Did you see Woodstock?
What happened was, in 1969, I graduated high school. Mm-hmm. It's a miracle I graduated high school, trust me. Because I was living in Manhattan and taking the train, subway every day, because everybody thought that I lived in Queens with my girlfriend and her parents. Even my parents thought that. But I did graduate high school, but that summer, after I graduated, my mom said, you're going to come up here to York Beach, Maine, and you're going to stay up here until your 18th birthday. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I was a good kid. I didn't get in trouble or anything, but I was a good kid. But they were worried about me and felt like, you know, this is crazy. She's living in New York City. She's not even 18. At least come home and stay here till you're 18. So I got my first waitress job in York Beach. Mm-hmm. At Rosie's Restaurant. Yeah, Rosie's Restaurant. And I remember there was this place, Bill and Bob's Jewelry Store, but it also was like they used to make sandals in the shop. We used to get these laces to put up the side of our jeans. It was the style to crisscross them, make holes and go through the whole thing. And the sandals were like the gladiator sandals that tie up. And so this place, Bill and Bob's, had this section where they did that type of thing, other than just the jewelry. And we used to all hang out there, the teenagers. It was the place to hang out. It was fun. And so the one night they go, okay, Betty, come on over, quick. Here he is, the man's going to land on the moon, the first man, first step for mankind. And I'm like, wow, man, that's really cool. At this point, I was already a hippie, but I had come to York, Maine. So that's what teenagers were all excited about, anything to do with that type of stuff. And the really older people really were like mesmerized about all of that, right? And Woodstock, I ended up watching Woodstock, which I was a little teed off about it because I really wanted to be at Woodstock. And so I ended up watching it on TV at this restaurant. I told the lady, could you please put it on so we could at least watch it? So I watched as much as I could, and I thought it was fantastic. And then, on my 18th birthday, I went back to New York City. Yeah, I went back to New York City. And my son Joe, we moved back here in 1980, and he was 8 years old. And I was living with my dad. He was great, Irv Lipton. He was the best. And I was living with him, and I really enjoyed living in Maine. It was such a change, though, from New York City. I mean, even my son, he said to me, Mom, I'm upset. I have to call my friends every day for at least a month so I don't feel bad because I miss everybody. But I moved up here. I got divorced, and I moved up here in 1980. And I thought York was a great place. And there's so much history in York, back in the days, the way things were. And
did they have like the historical village back in the 80s?
They had like the jail part and all that, and they had Jefford's Tavern. And in fact, my son in school, they had a day where they had to dress up like back in the 1800s. That was a requirement for the kids to dress up like that and do the whole thing with the historical area there. Oh yeah, they did the whole thing. The old jail. You've heard of the old jail in York Beach? It's cool.
Yeah, I went there when I was.
Do you know what they fed the inmates?
I can't remember.
Back in the day, they fed the inmates lobster.
Oh yeah,
because they considered it the insect of the ocean.
Yeah. So how was a gunquit like during that time period?
Well, my aunt Joyce Price, was a great artist, pastel artist, and she. It was an art colony. A lot of it was an art colony. I mean, the French people were there all along, coming to Ogunquit tourists, but the art colony was great, and the playhouse goes way back. So it was cool. But I went to Ogunquit. Listen to this. When I first moved up here, I would hang out in Ogunquit. I'd go to Poor Richard's Pub because that's where they had really good bands and the music and all. And then all of a sudden, they had this ordinance in Ogunquit that said, no more music. Yeah. So this guy opened up a nightclub right on the line of Ogunquit and York called Good Night Ogunquit. Good Night Ogunquit. So we all hung out there. And then I made my way to York Beach to hang out to a place called Bogart's during the 80s. And Bogart's was an incredible nightclub disco type of thing, And my husband now, Johnny, they used to call him Tank. He was the guy that sort of ran the first, the whole thing, well, with a lot of help of other people, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go there later on because of Ogunquit and all that,
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted live bands, so I went to this Bogart's, and they used to have a line going around the block just to get in. It was unbelievable back in the day. And then things have changed a great deal in everything. Portsmouth, for instance. I started doing readings in Portsmouth in 1985 with my girlfriend Lori Runyons. And the whole old side of Portsmouth was fabulous. It was, they had these places where they'd have poetry readings and people would hang out. It was called Petronella's. Then there used to be a place called Clarence's Chowder House where People hung out. Everybody was so cool. There was a restaurant called 72 Islington Street, which was like a church, and then made into a restaurant. And then I opened up at the store, the Witch's Brew, 1985 in Portsmouth. It was books, crystals, incense, readings, that type of thing. And then everything went well in Portsmouth until 1990. In 1990, the Air Force Base closed, and a lot of people, 50,000 people, left the area. So it was very difficult for people. I even had a place in Agunquit one summer. I think it was where are we now? In 1989, I had a shop in Agunquit for one season. And then, anyway, I said, that's it. I'm staying in Portsmouth, but I'm just going to do my readings. And that's what I did ever since. So I've been here since 85. It's a long time. Became Portsmouth psychic. There you go. But now you got the new side of Portsmouth. It looks like, Little Boston. And then we've got the this side, the old side, like, by the park and everything. And don't you think? What do you think of Portsmouth now?
It's like Boston #2.
But we still have the old flavor, of Portsmouth, one side at least. And the people are still all cool and funky, right? Don't you think?
I only come to see you in Portsmouth now, so I haven't hung out with anyone in the
Portsmouth is still cool. And as far as York Beach goes, my son Joe became so successful since we moved here in 1980. He's now the owner of the Viewpoint and the Stone's Throw in York Beach, and he just bought the Nevada he's redoing. So thank God, psychically I knew he was going to do great, and he worked hard for it. It's not like it was handed to him. He did it all.
Was York Beach a nightlife kind of place?
Well, again, you got the Bogarts, and then you had several bars that were really fun to go to and hang out. And
was it as lively like it is now?
Oh yeah,
back then?
Probably more lively.
More lively.
I think so.
Okay. Was here more lively too?
Well, back in the day in York Beach, things would be open till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you had places to go and eat after the places closed, the bars. You could get food and everything, and a place named Marsh's, and then there was another place you could go and get food, and we always went and got the food afterwards, or we'd come to Portsmouth just because we'd go to the where is it, where the truckers go over there. It was always open late. Or over here, what's the name of the...
Gillies?
Gillies. We'd go to Gillies. So, in that respect, fun, entertainment is... look at Portsmouth now. It has like 60 restaurants practically per 10 streets practically that are the main downtown, right? Mm-hmm. It's a mecca for people to come to and have a good time. And a lot of predictions I made about Portsmouth came true over the years, a lot. And I made a lot of predictions, and they all came true. So I said, what this town needs is some more coffee shops, and I think it's going to happen. Because way back when, there was like one coffee shop down the square, and that was it, right? So, and then now there's coffee everywhere, right? America's favorite thing to do, drink coffee.
Drink coffee.
Right?
Drink coffee.
And, but I would say I've had a lot of great stuff happen to me in my life, and I'm going to have to write a book or something. You're going to have to help me do that. Write a book about my life as a psychic. That would be cool. That would be cool, right?
That would be.
But I've made big predictions, world events and everything else that have come true.
What events have happened?
Well, in 1993, the World Trade Center was bombed for the first time. And I was living in Maine, and I said that day, many years from now, there's going to be a severe, terrible terrorist attack. And it's going to involve 2 planes exploding, one in New York City and one in D.C. Mm-hmm. So people would say to me, years later and stuff, hey, Betty, I'm going to go to D.C. Am I going to be safe? Or what do you think? No. But I had this one friend, lovely woman, who was a flight attendant. And she said, I told her, you're never going to get hurt in a plane accident or anything like that, because, people get scared if they work that profession, They want to know from a psychic. So one night, and it was 9/10/2001, she took the place of one of her girlfriends to go to California. And so when she flew back to Boston, to Logan, in the morning, she saw all her friends sitting there having coffee and donuts, or whatever they had. I'm not sure if it was just donuts. And she said, hey, guys, have a great day. And that was the crew that was the fateful 9/11 flight to the World Trade Center. But, yeah. And then I had people after the 9/11 that wanted to know about what the family, if they're going to find the bodies, everything. It was really beyond the beyond.
So the family came to you?
Different families, yes. In fact, a lot of the time, like I helped out the Portsmouth Police Department, but a lot of the time, the person who was involved with the problem would, like something happened to their loved ones or missing or murdered, or they would come to me to find out what really happened. So I did help the police department, and I was supposed to be on the show, Psychic Detectives, but then the police department turned around and said, we didn't keep recorded records of everything, but Betty did help us. So I was a little ticked off that I didn't end up on the Psychic Detective show.
Did anything... Did you ever read for anybody famous back in the day besides Jerry Garcia?
I read for the guy from The Loving Spoonful. I know it sounds funny, the lead singer. I read Vivian from Def Leppard.
What was he like?
Well, it's really something. Is that, I don't even know if I'm supposed to tell people this, because I don't usually tell people their business that's in the... But it doesn't matter.
Well,
he married...
You don't need to tell me.
It doesn't matter. He married a girl from Dover,
okay,
New Hampshire.
Okay.
He married her. He came to me for a reading while he was visiting with her family and everything else, and he came in for a reading. And it was a really good reading. And he was just very, very ultra cool.
He was just a cool guy naturally?
Just very, very cool. Like, I think he's from Ireland or something originally. Yeah.
So he had an accent?
Yeah. And
was he fun to talk to?
Well, we were talking about his life going forward, which I can't...
Well, not like you're reading, but like...
But I did tell him,
person.
and this was like 10 years ago at least,
Mm-hmm.
I did tell him that his band was going to keep going, and do very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I did say a lot of stuff probably that happened within the band, which I can't talk about, that things got better. And if you notice now, they're having a big concert, in Boston next week or something, or this week. Do you know when it is? I think it's maybe at Gillette Stadium. I don't even know where it is. But people still love Def Leppard, right?
Yeah.
And then I read a lot of famous authors. I remember I didn't read Stephen King, but my girlfriend went to one of those book signings, type of thing, and she gave him the book that I was in, the 100 Top Psychics in America, which was published in '96, the first book. That's what I'm in. And she gave him the book. I signed it to give it to him. And she said, Betty wants, if anytime you ever need some help with some of them, like the movies and different things, all about psychic phenomena, just let Betty know. And sure enough, he took the book. And what I found out, he never called me, but I was honored that he took the book and that,
Mm-hmm. What was the America's Top Psychics book, Top 100?
There was one in 1996. That's the one I was in. And then they did some redo, second book of it later on. I'm not sure, sometime, 10 years.
Did like someone come and interview for it? Or?
The first book.
Yeah, for the first book.
Well, for the first book, there was this woman, she lived in New York City. And my cousin, Wendy Ashley, who's a fantastic astrologist, Jungian astrologist, who lives on Peaks Island, they asked her if anybody else in her, they put her under psychic astrologer. So anybody else in the family was psychic, and she said that my cousin, my first cousin, Betty Lipton, she's a great psychic. And so they called me up, and they acted like the book was going to be called True Psychic Stories because they didn't want us to know that it was going to be about the 100 top psychics, right? So I told them 2 stories, one about the Grateful Dead and one about my brother Joey. My brother Joey, before he left for Vietnam, he said, if any man ever hurts me, he'll come back to save me. And believe it or not, unfortunately, I was attacked and, possibly almost raped and murdered in New York City, and I screamed the first time, and nobody saved me. But the second time I screamed, the guy said, if you scream again, I'll kill you, the would-be rapist. And I said, Joey! I screamed so loud, and all of a sudden, the door opens up. This is at nighttime in the Lower East Side. Not a great neighborhood. The door opens up, and out of the clear blue, this guy comes and whoom, smashes the guy in the face. And the guy screams, I'm sorry, the bad guy, and he runs off. And afterwards, I go to thank this guy who saved me, and he said, get away from me, lady. This is some spooky shit. He said, I felt my whole body being like lifted off the ground. And so you just keep away from me, lady, like that. I said, but you saved me. That was not me. And the next day, I'm passing the building during the day, and somebody did it with paint or whatever. But the way my brother wrote his name, Joe, big letters, was on the side of the building where the attack happened. So my brother Joey saved me. So I told them these stories. Then they started asking me stuff like they wanted me to do a reading for the writer or somebody else that knew the writer. And then all of a sudden, she calls me up, a long time later and says, you're going to be in the book and everything else. And then I was on the radio a lot. So I was on WERZ a lot.
Was that because of the book? Or?
No, I was always on WERZ from a period from the 80s to like 2000. The last show I was doing was a 2 guys and a girl morning show on WERZ 107.1 FM. And so way back, she just said to me, can you talk about it on the radio show? I said, why not? People want to get it. I'm in it, Seacoast Psychic, Betty Lipton. So everybody started buying the book and everything else. And yeah, it was cool, It was nice. I got people from all over the country that started calling me. One guy in particular bought Jerry Garcia's house in Marin, in California. And he became a good buddy of mine, plus a very good client. He was very wealthy. And I'll never forget, back in the day, he said, Betty, guess what I'm developing? This is in the 80s. He goes, I said, what are you? I said, well, you're a genius. You're a total genius. His name was Henry Cultus. And I said, what are you developing? He says, I'm developing a brain for the computer, a brain. So you could ask questions, and it'll talk back to you and tell you. I says, really? That's fantastic. Anyway, I don't know who he dealt with, whether or not it was Apple later on or whoever, but he sold, the whole thing, what he did. So he was famous in his own right, even though, of course, everybody else gets the credit for things. Do you know what I mean? Okay. It's just the way it is, right? I mean, look at writers. Writers wrote about stuff, and it happened years later. And a lot of the stuff in sci-fi came true, didn't it, later on? A lot of the stuff, even H.G. Wells stuff, a lot of it came true, right? Leonardo da Vinci, airplanes, this, that, the whole shebang. And so these people had vision. Even artists, great artists had vision because they deal with different realms, different places, different dimensions, whatever. I mean, that's getting heavy, but there's more than what we just see in front of us. You know what I mean? So the most important thing is for people to treat each other with brotherly love, to be kind to one another, to realize everybody has God in them. Everybody. So try to treat them with love and respect if you can.